Okay, so I'll just okay. That's not right. Okay.
Yeah, it's working now. I can see the stream.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, Hare Krishna, today we'll be hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 7, and we'll be doing text 1 and 2. So we'll start with Jai Radhamata before that, and I'll just get the link out there. Okay. So the way it will work today is that it's on Facebook and YouTube, not on Zoom. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat, and then I'll be able to see them and I can respond to them. Okay. I'll just open the window, it's a bit dark. All right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astotra Shatashi Shimatis Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Skaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Vara Krishna Vishnu Budale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachayane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashtadeshatayane. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen and it will be this one. Here we go. So we're starting a new chapter today. It's chapter 7 of the 4th canto. And it is entitled, what is it called? Let's see. Sacrifice performed by Daksha. Sorry. Okay, so we'll do the first 2 verses. The second verse has the purport. Maitra uvacha ityajena nunu initena bhavena paritushyata abhyadhyayi mahobaho prahasya shruyatam iti. Okay, so it looks like it's still showing my video rather than my screen. I'm not sure what's happening. I was hoping you could see what's happening here, which is unusual. Let me just try again so that you can see the text. It might be easier. So I'll just stop sharing and try again. Here we go. Share screen. And okay, here. Oh, I see. Now I see how it works. Excuse my technical incompetence. Anyway, I'll just continue. I'm not sure how to make the screen actually appear. Oh, there we go. Great. All right. So the translation is, the sage Maitreya said, O mighty armed Vidura, Lord Shiva, being thus pacified by the words of Lord Brahma, spoke as follows in answer to Lord Brahma's request. Okay. So next verse. Mahadeva uvacha Nagam pragesha balanam varnaye nanu chintaye deva maya vibhutanam dandas tatra drito maya. All right, word by word. Mahadevaha, Lord Shiva, uvacha, said, na, not, agam, offense, praja isha, O Lord of created beings, balanam, of the children, varnaye, I regard, na, not, anuchintaye, I consider, deva maya, the external energy of the Lord, abhibhutanam, of those deluded by, dandaha, rod, tatra, there, dritaha, used, maya, by me. Translation. Lord Shiva said, my dear Father Brahma, I do not mind the offences created by the demigods, because these demigods are childish and less intelligent. I do not take a serious view of their offences, and I have punished them only in order to right them. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are two types of punishment. Right. Make it a little bigger there. There we go. There are two types of punishment. One is that which a conqueror imposes on an enemy, and the other is like that of a father, a father imposes on his son. There is a gulf of difference between these two kinds of punishment. Lord Shiva is by nature a Vaishnava, a great devotee. And his connection, and his name in this connection is Ashutosh. He's always satisfied, and therefore he did not become angry as if he were an enemy. He is not inimical to any living entity. Rather, he always wishes the welfare of all. Whenever he chastises a person, it is just like a father's punishment of his son. Lord Shiva is like a father because he never takes seriously any offense by any living entities, especially the demigods. Om Ajnanatmarandasya Niranjana Shalakaya Chakshu Amritam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Milovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupakaramayam Tadati Swapadantikam Narayanam Namaskritya Devam. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this pastime of Daksha is interesting. As usual, I started to make a rap on this one, and I've written my notes down somewhere, but I can't find them. It starts off with, Daksha got the head of a goat because of the offensive words that he spoke to Lord Shiva. And I can't remember the rest, but hopefully I'll be able to find it and share it with you sometime. But this is the essence of the story, that when Daksha offended Lord Shiva, then there was so much turmoil, and Daksha had to suffer so much. At the same time, Daksha was rectified and returned to his proper position. So Lord Shiva, through his punishment, was able to actually help Daksha to become more Krishna conscious. And so this is really the point that this verse is making, or rather the purport, where Prabhupada is talking about different types of punishment, and that really the ultimate idea of punishment is rectification, not revenge or vindictiveness, where like he's describing here, that there's a conqueror. He's trying to take away others' property because it's a selfish motivation. The punishment of Lord Shiva in this case is actually for the rectification and for the best ultimate good of the people that he's punishing. So it's a very interesting subject, and it makes us think that as we're parents, sometimes we have to correct our children, and it's interesting language. The word here uses chastise. Now, when we talk about it in modern times, he really chastised them, we usually mean that he gave them a telling off. But in the original sense of the word, it meant to be hit with a stick, or some corporal punishment. So this verse brings up for me the topic of corporal punishment. We can see that in many traditional cultures there was some corporal punishment. We can even hear in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes that corporal punishment was a thing. We see that it's still not prominent, but still practiced in some countries like Singapore, where the government is has some very strict rules. If you're caught smuggling drugs, for example, then you're beaten by a cane. And so the question arises, when is this type of punishment appropriate? We can see, particularly as devotees in the Hare Krishna movement, that there was a lot of abuse that was done to children in our gurukulas in particular, where the teachers, would beat the children and punish the children in different ways, which were quite cruel. And I know from my own experience, when I was at school, they had the strap and the cane, and that was considered normal. That, you have to beat the kids, otherwise they won't have discipline. It's very interesting how in modern times the psychology has changed a lot, and there's a lot of evidence that this type of punishment can be harmful for the psychology of the child. So, yeah, I'm not speaking from a position of authority on the subject, because we can see that it must have its place, otherwise it wouldn't be mentioned. It's like, for example, might have to share my screen again, just a second. In the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about punishment, not specifically corporal punishment, but the idea that punishment is something which, my screen will take a little while to come up, I think. And here we go. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, among all means of suppressing lawlessness, I am punishment. And then Prabhupada says here, when miscreants are punished, the agency of chastisement represents Krishna, which is kind of interesting. So for myself, I'd make a distinction here between, a government being very strong against wrong crimes, just like we hear from Prabhupada that the death penalty is appropriate for a murderer because it saves them from, for that person themselves, it actually saves them from much worse karma in the future. And it also provides, a good deterrent effect and sends a strong message to society that, these violent acts will not be accepted. But when it comes to raising our children, there seems to be a lot of evidence that this is not really the way to make children, to raise children in a way that will inspire them and so on. Like you can imagine if we punish children, you're not doing japa, I'm going to give you a cane, then they're going to associate chanting japa with pain, and therefore they're not going to want to do that activity anymore. So we have to be very careful in looking at examples and saying, look, well, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita there was corporal punishment, so I can use it on my children. But if the associations that become negative, it can be can be very detrimental. So I'd be interested if anyone has any comments about how to kind of understand the corporal punishment. But from my point of view, certainly for someone in a government, they need to be very strong against violent crime and things like that. But when it comes to our family, we should really be trying to develop inspiration on the basis of love and trust. And if we want to stand up, we want to have clear boundaries with our children. It doesn't require physical violence. So I'm interested to hear what you think. This Prabhupada said that these Bhagavatam should be discussed threadbare, and it should be looked at from many angles of vision. And so when there's controversial topics like this, I find it helpful to discuss with devotees different perspectives. What do you think? Do you think that, hitting children has a place in raising children in Krishna consciousness or not? So that's just one interesting kind of topic that's come out of this particular verse. We'll go back to it. I remember when I was, at school, they used to have this example that when the teacher would give the cane or the belt, they'd say, this hurts me more than it hurts you, which is mostly a lie. A lot of times the teacher would just be doing it to get revenge because they're so frustrated that the person was not obeying them. But in principle, that is the idea, that if we are restricting, for example, let's not talk about corporal punishment, but let's say child has done something wrong, and then we've decided that, look, what you've done is, being very harmful, and you need to get some consequences for that. And, we're just doing that so that you can, learn the lesson. And even then, in modern psychology, saying that this idea of punishment, whether it's physical or otherwise, isn't a very effective method of changing. Because if you think back when you were younger, or even now, if someone tries to restrict you or punish you, often, or so-called consequences, it often doesn't make us think, oh, yes, I was wrong. I shouldn't do that. Rather, we think, why are they punishing me? And it just makes you more inimical to the person giving the punishment. So it's a very interesting topic. Here's Lord Shiva. He's becoming very, violent. He's not just standing by and letting things happen, but he's taking serious action. At the same time, it's saying that Lord Shiva, because he's so level-headed, in the sense of, he's always got the well wishes of people at heart, that he's, even though he's doing these punishments, he's still doing it with the best wishes of the people. So just let's go back to the verse and just to see it again. My dear Father Brahma, I do not mind the offenses created by the demigods. Because these demigods are childish and less intelligent, I do not take a serious view of their offenses, and I've punished them only in order to right them. So, this also brings up an interesting point, because it can be quite frustrating when we see people that are not as intelligent or uninformed or childish doing something wrong. What should we do? There are people who do things which are deliberately with deliberate ill intent, but then there's other times where people are just caught up in the modes of nature. I suppose in all cases it's like that. But when we see that someone's doing something which is not correct, many times it's just because they're being misled. And in the case of these demigods, Daksha was the one who really did the main offense, and all the demigods foolishly supported him. So I think this is an important point as well, that when we see that people are misguided, we shouldn't feel ill will towards them, but we should have compassion and try to help them. Just like in our Krishna conscious preaching, we see in society that people are so misled by demoniac atheistic scientists. Prabhupada used to always criticize demoniac leaders of society who are sending people on the wrong path, and they are just bewildered and confused by these people, and it can be very hard to preach. If we just go straight up to people and say, you are totally misleading, you're misled, you're a meat eater and you're breaking all these 4 regulative principles, and don't you know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead? You should just surrender. You're sending yourself to hell. This is the approach that some of these Christians make on the side of the road, that they're trying to tell the people, you're going to hell, turn or burn. And in general, it doesn't inspire people to change. So we need to be a little intelligent about how we approach people. So Lord Shiva, he was very powerful, and he had a powerful support. I mean, just on his own, he had so much power that he was able to arrange this whole situation to teach these people a lesson. We certainly don't have that power. And if we also misuse our power without being in such an elevated position as Lord Shiva, it's a very, very dangerous thing. But at the same time, if we see that something is wrong, that someone's committing offenses, we shouldn't just do nothing, right? Sometimes, like I was having a discussion recently where I was saying that, if you're in a situation where you know that something really bad is happening, and people are really suffering because of it, what will you do? And some of the responses were, well, just be like Prahlad Maharaj and Haridas Thakur, and just chant Hare Krishna and depend on Krishna, and don't, you don't really have to do anything. It's all Krishna's arrangement, and, don't worry. So from one point of view, you can understand that ultimately Krishna's got everything in mind. But when you see someone being abused, then, I feel that especially if they're devotees, we have a duty to stand up for them. And in our society, again, going back to our problem, if you take the child abuse example, you might, if you know that there's child abuse happening and you don't do anything about it, that's also an offense. Because you could argue, well, everyone's getting their karma. So, these devotee children that are getting molested, that's their karma. And, just chant Hare Krishna and just, know that the material world is a horrible place. You don't need to do anything. No, of course, that's not right. Especially for Vaishnavas, we have to stand up and fight. Just like Lord Chaitanya gave the example. So we see Lord Nityananda, when he was struck by Jagai and Madai with that broken pot, he was like, it's okay, don't do anything, it's fine. But what was Lord Chaitanya's mood? You have attacked a Vaishnava. I'm going to chop off your head. How dare you? And so this idea that it's more Krishna conscious just to ignore things and not do anything about them may not always be the correct approach. Especially if we see that devotees are suffering through injustice, we have to stand up for those devotees. This is my conviction. We heard in the last class with Surat Krishna Prabhu, he was talking about how when Draupadi was being disrobed, that Drona and Bhishma and all these other seniors just stood by and did nothing. And the point was raised that they were killed at that point. They had already killed themselves by not standing up to defend that devotee in that time. When Arjuna was talking about, I don't want to kill my relatives, my grandfathers and my teachers and so on, the point was made that they are already killed because of this offense that they committed to Draupadi. They had already signed their own death certificate, you could say. And therefore Arjuna was just meant to be the instrument to, make that happen through the Battle of Kurukshetra. So when there's abuse of children, we need to take it very seriously. When there's abuse of any Vaishnava, we need to take it very seriously. So this is a very important point. At the same time, we need to be intelligent. If you're in like a totalitarian government, like you've seen in the movies, like Gestapo and all this type of KGB, in order to do something about that situation, you don't want to just go out in the street and say, you leaders are all demons. You'll just get shot, right? There has to be intelligence. That when some injustice is being done, we need to use our intelligence about how to approach it. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it gives us a few clues about how to do this. At first, actually Chanakya gives good advice. At first, we try to solve the problem through talking. We can see in the Mahabharata, it was like that. Krishna was negotiating with the Pandavas. He did all that he could to give them a chance to stop the war. But the Kauravas refused all of the requests to resolve the situation in a peaceful way. And there was no choice but to continue with the battle. So, this is just an example that if we don't stand up when things are wrong, then it's we become implicated in that violence. So the other example, and then another thing to consider is considering our position. Are we in a position of power that we can do something about it or not? And in this connection, that there was a case in Australia. There was a temple president who was eating chicken. And pretty much all the devotees knew about it, but they didn't say anything because, he's a temple president. I can't say anything. So what Prabhupada's response was quite interesting. He said, well, at least the seniors should have said something. So maybe it may be difficult for a junior devotee to, criticize a senior that's like a temple president or, a leader in some position. So that junior person may not directly go to that person, but they can go to another senior and say, look, I've noticed this behavior of the senior. Please do something. This would be the correct etiquette in that case. But we can see, again, Prabhupada's making the point. If something is going wrong, we have to speak up about it. We can't just turn our eye the other way. I think these are covered most of the main points that I wanted to bring up here. So I think the essence here is that if something is causing us inconvenience, then we may tolerate and understand it as Krishna's will. But if we're in a position to do something, and most of us are, most times, to do something, whether it's reporting this to a senior, a person who has more power to do something about it, or participating in a civil disobedience, like Lord Chaitanya, that was what he did. He organized all the devotees. When Chankazi said, you can't chant, what did Lord Chaitanya do? He got all the devotees together, and with the strength of numbers, they came in, they chanted the holy name in this ultimate civil disobedience Sankirtan movement. And through the chanting of the holy name, they were able to make the Chankazi realize, whoa, there's a lot of people that don't agree with me. And they were also, threatening violence against him. If you read in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, you can see that they went to Chankazi's property and they were destroying all of his gardens, and he became very afraid, actually. So it wasn't just that they were chanting the holy name, but they were also, being violent. That they were, like Prabhupada said, that we should not hit the child with a stick. Just going back to the corporal punishment for children, I forgot to make this point. That Prabhupada said you should not use a stick on a child. He had one statement that if they're using the stick on children, the stick should be used on them. They should be beaten. But he did say at some point that you can show the stick, but don't use it. So in this way, Lord Chaitanya's followers, they were making a show of force to Chankazi that, you can't abuse the devotees. We're going to stand up to it. And although ultimately they didn't kill anyone, but still they showed that they were serious. And Lord Chaitanya was able to, turn them around. So we have these examples from our scriptures about how, when something is not right, that's harming devotees specifically, then, we need to stand up for those things. And if we don't stand up when devotees are being abused, then we become implicated in it, just like those who stood around and didn't do anything when Draupadi was being disrobed. They lost their lives in the Battle of Kurukshetra as a result. So if there's any questions, please type them in the chat on Facebook or on YouTube. I can see there are a few comments, mostly just Hare Krishna, things like that. But if you do have any questions or comments on this topic, please feel free. While I'm waiting for the questions, there's just one other point that came to mind here that's very related to this verse. As a society, it's very important that we behave in a consistent and fair way, and that we have the same rules that apply for everybody. So if someone does something wrong, they need to go through the same justice process that everyone else has to go through. It doesn't mean that we disrespect that person, or that, for example, someone may have done some act which is not proper. And we may think, well, anyway, they're still chanting. So Bhagavad Gita says that if someone's still practicing Krishna consciousness, then it doesn't matter if they do something wrong. So we may feel like that. And, personally, we can still obviously show respect to anyone that's still practicing Krishna consciousness. But if someone's done something wrong, they need to go through the same process that everybody needs to go through. And there may even be punishment. Just like in this case here, Lord Shiva is saying that, yes, I punished the demigods, but it wasn't because I felt anything bad against them. These demigods are also devotees. But Lord Shiva, as one of the Mahajanas and leaders of the whole world, is showing the example that, you can't offend devotees. Because of the offense that these demigods did, Sati committed suicide. So just think about the seriousness of this. That when you commit an offense to someone and it leads to someone's suicide, that has quite strong consequences. And so in this particular case, So in the case of, a society, it's really important that we are consistent. And even if someone is punished, it doesn't mean that we have to, like we may see that someone's practicing Krishna consciousness and, they seem to have righted themselves, but still everyone has to be accountable for the actions that they've done. And it's not being mean to someone, it's being fair. Especially if someone does something that harms a victim. If there's devotees that have been hurt by what someone has done, then as a society, it's important that the same justice processes for everybody. And even if there's some punishment given to that person, it's not out of because we dislike that person or there's something personal. It's very important for our society to set the example that if anyone does anything wrong, no matter who they are, no matter what their position, that we will follow through and be consistent and protect the victims in our society, to make sure. When we give that strong message, then just like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita about punishment, it's a way that stops people from doing it in the future. When they see that, if I do this, there'll be a consequence. I can't just kind of get away with it because I make a show of, being a good devotee or, because I've got friends or something like that. It's very important as a society for us to be respected properly, that the same rules apply for everybody. And if someone's punished and, they go through that process, then we can still respect them as a devotee if they are practicing, because people do make mistakes and they do correct themselves, but they still need to be accountable for the mistakes that they have made. So I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but I just read one of the comments here. Hare Krishna, thanks for unpacking this idea of what a Vaishnava should do in times of adversity. Finding a middle ground between surrendering by leaving it all up to Krishna or choosing how to take action is a real conundrum. That's true. And as I was saying before, as devotees, we all have this challenge in our mind that we see that everyone's going to hell, basically. They're on the wrong path. They're doing all these materialistic things. They don't understand about Krishna consciousness. And we want to wake them up. Chant Hare Krishna, you'll be happy. Surrender to Krishna. You can go back to Godhead. You can get free from all of the miseries of this material world. And then people say, no, you're crazy. It's not like that at all. This world is a good place. I'm enjoying here. So what can you do? We have to do the best that we can to try to wake people up. And it's not always, the direct, hardcore line that will be more effective. But if we can just make friends with people, and then gradually, when they have some trust, then we can start to explain some things as they become more awake to hear it. And in fact, the times that we're in now is a good opportunity to open up this dialogue with people, because a lot of people are suffering. They've had enough of these lockdowns and all these things that are going on and all of the conflict. And so when people are suffering, it means that they're in a position to be open to an alternative Krishna consciousness. So one more question: how to know if it is our karma or Krishna's will? At times we're not sure what to do or decide. Is that situation, what is our karma, or should wait? Yeah, so very good question. Where do we turn when we're not sure what to do? We can look at Arjuna's example. He turned to Krishna. So if we're not really sure what's happening, we can turn to the Bhagavad Gita directly, Krishna's books, Bhagavatam. We can ask advice from trusted devotees and hear different ideas. We can also ask our peers who are going through similar things, how do you think about this? What would you do? What's your decision that you've decided to make in this case? And then ultimately also we need to turn to Krishna in our heart and just feel our conscience. The super soul is also there in our conscience. We need to listen to that. We shouldn't ignore our conscience. Of course, if our conscience is saying something totally opposite from what all the books are saying and what the Vaishnavas are saying, then that's another thing. But, when we have some choices to make, then we can feel in our heart what is the most, best course of action to take. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we have to follow our conscience. If we don't follow our conscience, then it means that we're not trying to hear Krishna in the heart. If we pray to Krishna, just like Prabhupada was praying when he came to America, I'm praying to you that you give me the intelligence how these people can understand your message. So in the same way, we can pray to Krishna that he will give us the understanding of how to we can pray to Krishna to give us the understanding how we can do the right thing that he wants us to do. All right, so I'll end here. Thank you very much for asking questions and for being here. And feel free to add any further comments or questions in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube. And we can continue the conversation if you think it's valuable. So, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.